Dr. Chaw at 5 o'clock. That's going to be crazy. I want to do this really good. But you guys are dedicated, so come on in. Hey, I left a slide up here. I'm Kevin. This is DJ. Hey, help us make this workshop memorable. We do this all the time. I just left some instruction here to sign in if you want to stay in contact. Here's an outline. Grab a note card. Hey, feel free to take a picture, tag us. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to do we're going to talk for 45 minutes. You might have 5 minutes worth of questions, and we don't even know who you are. So this is why the Facebook, the social media, we'll do anything. So that's our handle. So feel free to do that. We'll give a couple more minutes as people are coming in. We should set up. So just do that. Text everybody, hey man, come on in here because this dude is he's ready to get started. And then we'll get started. It's gonna be real fun. So yeah, go grab. If you haven't grabbed one, grab it. Grab a note card as well. Anything else? No, we're good. You want to get this? You want to just do it up front? That's fine. Yeah. Sit down. Sure. Okay, then let me move on this side. Come on in, grab a outline, sign in, have some fun. I'm already here.
No, I'm good.
Honestly, if I could, I'd say, hey, everybody get Starbucks. I'd buy you a Starbucks right now. I would. Unfortunately, I'm on pastor pay. You guys, come on in. Just imagine I bought you a Starbucks. Feel good about that. There you go. Imagine. We'll give a few minutes. I'm just curious what kind of churches we're at. Everybody, just throw it out. A name of a church or ministry that you're part of. I'm gonna start here, then I'll get a scope. Just go ahead. What are you guys at?
Vertical Point.
Vertical Point. What city?
La Mirada.
La Mirada. That's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All three, you guys. 4. Okay. And La Mirada, Vertical Point, Asian American, multi-ethnic. How would you classify it?
Predominantly Asian American right now.
Predominantly Asian American. Okay. Cool. How about over here? Where are you from? Ministry or church or?
We're all from Glory Church.
Glory
Yeah.
in the house.
Yeah.
Is that? That's wait. Let me think. I know where that is. I want to see Fullerton there.
Downtown LA.
It's downtown LA.
Yeah.
Someone has a giant picture of Jesus on the
Oh, that's 10 freeway. When I'm driving on the 10, right? That's you guys?
Yeah.
Oh, I always see you guys. You're on 10, and then you have the memory verses going on. It's in Korean, so I don't know. That's your church? Right on. Okay. I know your church because I used to work in the downtown area. You're driving on the 10 to connect to 60 or 5, right?
Yeah.
And you see just glory.
Yeah. That's the one.
Glory. All right. I like that. You guys have a... Okay, how about here?
Saddleback Anaheim.
Saddleback Anaheim. Who's this?
I'm Solomon.
Solomon? Oh, that's... Okay, Solomon. Hey, don't you have a 4 o'clock service to get to? Oh, you go to Sunday? All right. Hey, well, welcome. I'm Saddleback Irvine.
That's right.
I love Jeremiah's a good friend of mine. Very good friend of mine.
Cool.
Hey, well, so what brings you by?
We lead young adults and just want to get more information and they're kind of our
Okay.
heart. So yeah.
So I already know your church is multi-ethnic. Good. All right, back here. Just church. The church and city you're from.
Oh, YMCC.
Youngna. Oh, the legendary church of Ben Shin and Michael Lee. Yeah, Michael Lee.
Stephen Hahn.
All right, good. Back here.
I'm interning at Rock Harbor, but my goal was to go plant an Asian church or Korean church.
Which that's different. Asian. You're still trying to figure out Asian or Korean?
No, I think my demo, my sweet spot more in actually Korean.
Okay.
So I mean, you never know where.
Of course, you gotta be open up. That's why we're here, multi-ethnic. Good. And we're gonna get started here. You guys just kind of up here, any moment, sign up, grab a handout, grab a note card, and then that's our handles. Post a picture and tag us. Would be great. Faith back there. Faith from Mariners Church. I love that. She actually leads a wonderful ministry out of the. We've been blessed with a building that she leads a women's ministry, and she's just wonderful discipler back there. Thank you guys for being here. As you guys are coming in, I am loading up on Starbucks right now, so that means I got a lot of caffeine in me. You guys are the elite. You're sticking through. You guys are going to make it through this whole workshop. I mean, you're Asian. You pay $25. You're going to maximize $25. I get it. My name is Kevin Nguyen. This is my friend DJ Chuang. Many of you guys might know him more than me because he's the orange guy. But I guess the story here is, maybe we can just sit down. And this is just a simple chat conversation here. And we'll just sit here a little, DJ. But one of the things I was going to ask was, DJ and I, when we first started, this was about 4 years ago, and I'll just give you the story here, and then I'll tell you where I'm from. DJ has, for many years now, 20, 30 years, 40 years,
Just 20.
20 years? Okay, we don't want to get too old here. Has been one of the foremost thinkers in Asian American gatherings. He was actually, him and Ben Shin, Dr. Ben Shin, put they started this Asian American Ministry Conference 3 years ago. But before that, there was a big genesis of what do we do with Asian Americans? And I was blessed. I moved over here from Texas, and about a few years ago, and about 4 years ago, God connected me into DJ. And DJ at that time was working with Saddleback on trying to understand Asian American leadership, because for some reason the population of Asian Americans is just exponentially is growing in America. Here's some quick stats for you, so you know. So you need to know the fastest growing demographics in America: Asian American at 40+%. That's faster than the Hispanic population. So Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton needs to be talking to Asians. You know what I'm saying? They need to get our votes. That's number one. And number two is Asian Americans are assimilating into the Christian mainline churches at a phenomenal rate. Ethnic churches, typical first-generation churches have grown, but you know what? The largest growth of the Asian American population is the second-gen, third-gen, fourth-gen, because you're having offspring. So no wonder the Hispanic population, the Asian population is the fastest growing in America, because the value of family is huge in both populations, so they're just reproducing like rabbits. And so DJ was working with our executive pastor at Saddleback, and they were trying to understand, because it wasn't because, it was, I guess, by accident, a bunch of Asian Americans were showing up at churches, and they're like, okay, what do we do now? And DJ, I'm going to hand it off to you. And then I think maybe you can tell a little bit how we got together and how we just formed this little gathering, and that's been our life mission these last 4 years.
Yeah, it's always helpful to get some background and context for where we came from. And I'm Chinese American. Kevin is Vietnamese American. I came to the U.S. when I was 8 years old, and grew up in a small town near Washington, D.C. called Winchester, Virginia. So I didn't grow up around Asians or Asian Americans. We were the only Asian Americans at our high school until junior year. And my parents ran a hotel business, and they took a step down from being school teachers and esteemed in Taiwan to be just kind of blue-collar, broken English kind of parents. But they wanted to give us kids the best opportunities. So I'm the oldest of 3 boys, and I went to the traditional route, the predictable narrative of being a computer engineer, and graduated from Virginia Tech. And the colors there are maroon and orange. That's the orange. And I worked a couple years as an engineer, and during those 2 years, I was discipled and prayed to seminary. I went to Dallas Theological Seminary, graduated in April 1995, so 21 years ago. Shook Chuck Swindoll's hand. Anybody know Chuck Swindoll? Yep. Shook his hand on Saturday, took my wife's hand on Sunday, and we've been married 21 years. I have a son who's 19, going to Biola here. He's a math major. I saw him earlier today, so that was a great joy. And I wanted to send him off to college before I worked on my book. And so for the last 9 months, I've written a book about multi-Asian churches, which is a word mashup, a portmanteau, for those of you that are into literature, of multi-ethnic and Asian Americans. And I believe that Asian Americans bring such a unique contribution because of our bicultural background to serve the multi-ethnic church, of which our world is already multi-ethnic. We live and go to school and work with people of all races and all demographics, and I think the church has a place to really speak into that and serve the community in that way. And so we want to create a little space here during this hour. Very grateful for Ben Shin opening up the space where we can have some conversations around that. I know there's a lot of great topics being covered about the intergenerational church, of which most of us have background in, and most of us are still in that context. But the Asian American population is 21 million today. It will be 42 million within the next 30 years, and that's in our lifetime. And the question before us is our church ready? And are we ready?
So the world is going to look a lot of yellow, a lot of brown, a lot of white. Does that make sense? We can all agree to that. Is that right? Yeah. That's where the votes are going to come from. So what we're doing is we want to frame this conversation. It's very different. I think we can just blast you with content, but the hour that we're at, this is the time where we get to converse and ask lots of questions. We can't cover everything, but all I can do is we can cover some basic topics that maybe we can just tease it out, But anytime I do a workshop or DJ does a workshop, bottom line is this. We've left our information on the handout, up screen. We want this conversation to keep going. It does not have to end today. In fact, if you just walk away like, oh, that was kind of one good gold nugget you picked up and that's kind of nice, great. But this conversation needs to keep going because the next 20 years, 10 years, it's going to change. And now the question is, with God, what God has gifted us and you and stewarded you with leadership and influence, what will we do as a group to help maximize our gifts, but also build the kingdom? So here's some thoughts here. We're engaging in a conversation. We purposely call this workshop Asian Americans Leading Well in a Multi-Ethnic World, because we've established it is a multi-ethnic world. Your neighbor is multi-ethnic. They are not Asian. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. Your grocery store, the movie theater, wherever you go, the Starbucks barista is a different ethnicity than us. And so we need to know is how do we help engage that? Because your church, even though it may serve a certain particular demographic, your life is definitely surrounded by a bunch of people that don't look like you. And so how do we help better engage that? I wanted to say that multi-ethnic, since this is a workshop at a Christian institution, we might as well just talk about it. Multi-ethnic and multi-Asian isn't a new social concept. You got to establish that. You have to remind yourself that it is that Paul has already talked about this in the Bible. And so I just want to read this passage here in Acts 19. Paul's in Ephesus, and he's trying to figure out how to spread the gospel, and what does it look like to him, because it is very different than Jerusalem, a primarily Jewish society. So here's what it says in Acts 19. Paul entered the synagogue. That's where Jewish people go. You guys know that? Jewish people, all right? And spoke boldly there for 3 months, arguing persuasively about the kingdom of God. I mean, he was trying to do a Sunday school at a Jewish synagogue. You guys know that. But some of them became obstinate. They refused to believe and publicly maligned the way. That's those who followed Jesus Christ, who was known the way. So Paul left them. He took the disciples with him and had discussions daily in the lecture hall of Tyrannus. That is a non-Jewish area. It was a school for Greeks. This went on for 2 years, and so that, check this out, I underlined it. All the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of where? Asia? That's funny. Heard the word of the Lord. Now you're going to say, well, did Paul turn his back on the Jewish people? The answer is no, because in Romans you know that he would give up his life for his fellow countrymen. Is that right? So no, he didn't turn his back on them. All he said is like, God, you open the doors, I go, I will chase anybody, anything, one more for Jesus Christ. That's my heart. That's my mission. I think that's what Jesus Christ said. And so he was just motivated. So if you let me speak Greek, you let me speak Hebrew, I don't care. I'm just going to go fish. And so I think that's where I want to help frame our conversation for today. DJ and I want to engage a few things. And so here's some 3 bullet points that we want to talk through with you. Number 1 is we want to engage in already multi-ethnic world. That is our desire. So I guess, DJ, we talked about, promoting, are we promoting a certain type of church, promoting a certain type of demographic? The answer is
No, we believe it takes all kinds of churches to reach all kinds of people. And so there's ethnic Asian churches. Many of you are Korean here, or there are other Chinese. Any Southeast Asians?
that's me.
Any South Asians? Okay. Non-Asians. Sometimes there's some non-Asians that sneak in here. But it takes all kinds of churches to reach all kinds of people because there's many different kinds of cultures and subcultures. And one of the things I recently discovered is in the Bible, there's 4 Gospels. Matthew, written for the Jews. Mark, written for the Romans. Luke, written for the Gentiles in Greek. And then John, for cosmopolitan. And so if you can have 4 Gospels to different ethnicity groups, I think it's reasonable to say we can have churches for different ethnic groups. But at the same time, if we just preach out of 1 Gospel, is that the full Gospel? I don't think so. We have the whole Bible of 66 books. And so while we may have a primary audience that we serve in order to reach a primary audience, I think to embody the full Gospel, we've also got to be reaching our community and the world. So you got to be bifocal local and global, in how we proclaim the gospel and be witnesses for Christ.
And so as this conversation continues, I guess the term Asian American is so foreign to me. I'm from Texas, okay? I grew up in Texas. It was after the war, Vietnam War. We came over, my family was here. And so I don't even think the Asian American term was even there. So somehow we made this term mainstream. And at the time when people asked me, hey, what are you? I literally would say I'm a Vietnamese Texan. Okay, what does that mean, right? People think like, well, dude, do you like take spring rolls and mix it with pho and barbecue? I mean, you put that all together. I said, no. Somehow I have grown up in a world where I actually like both at the same time, different world, but I don't mix it together. So the term Asian American is kind of like this mishmash of things, right? And so hopefully you get what I'm getting at is I identify where I was raised. I identify with my family that I grew up in. I identified in the world or the worldview of a Texan. And so that's what I mean by we have a lot of different backgrounds that put us together. But you know what makes us special? Makes you special, makes us special. Even if I said Korean American here, I could probably parse that out to what? Korean first gen, Korean 1.5, Korean second. I mean, I could parse that out even further. Well, what does that mean? Your parents, how long they've been here? Let's see, do you primarily speak Korean? You don't? I mean, you can keep going down that list, but does that really mean Korean American? Well, it's just this broad bucket, right? So we have to acknowledge that this is a multi-ethnic world, even inside the Asian world. My brother back here, I said, what kind of church are you planting? He goes, Asian American, maybe Korean American. I'm like, whoa, which one? That's totally different. Make sense? All right, good. What we also want to do is we want to extend our witness with the resources God has given us. I find it that DJ has a set of background that God has gifted him with experiences, passions, and influence that God wants him to be used. He's Asian American. At the same time, I'm Asian American. And God has gifted me with certain gifts and talents. And so what we want to do is somehow, how do we put ourselves together, all of us in this room and others, to extend it even further than the Asian American population? I guess here's the big question. Would you in this room would agree, our goal is to get 20 million Asian Americans in America, that's the population, to know Jesus? Or is it our goal to get 6 billion people in the world to know Jesus? What would you rather say? 6 billion. So why do we limit ourselves to just the people that come to our church when they can be expanded even further? Because God has gifted you and me unique abilities to cross over different cultures. Want to add to that, or you want to keep going?
No, that sounds great. Want to just pause to catch a breath and see if there's any questions out there. We passed around some note cards for you, so if you want to write down your question as we're talking, please do that and just pass it up to tap the person in front of you and pass the cards up, and we'll entertain those questions as we're talking. And then there's also a sign-up sheet that's going around if you would sign in and give us your contact info. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Again, as Kevin said, we want this to be a conversation starter. We don't have to wait till next year for the conference to pick up our conversation, and we've got all kinds of social media and communication tools available to us to be learning and working together towards our ultimate goal.
Because you never know, man. When that new president comes in, man, that's it. End of the world. I'm just saying. Let's talk it now. That's it. Our live feeds. That's it. It's cut. Okay. And then finally, I mean, it's what I just said. Is we want to amplify our influence with the teams that we're engaging with and the ministries that God has entrusted you with. So this is so important. And so discussion topics. I guess the best way to do this is for DJ and I actually just to share learning lessons from a fellow Asian American traveler. I don't even want to pretend to think that we know more. We are on a river raft. We might have been down this river a couple times, but we're in the boat with you. And so we're in this journey together. And if anybody's been river rafting, that river changes all the time. Even though it's the same river, it changes all the time. And so I think the best thing is to maybe have a conversation. And actually we framed 3 topics that we want to talk today. And this is where you get to jump in and be part of it. In my dissertation studies, there are 3 buckets in leadership development. 3 buckets that, if you were to just take all the leadership development, we can kind of synthesize into 3 big buckets of how you can train yourself or train others. And I actually want to frame it that way and give our experiences of where we've been and where we're trying to head. The first bucket is called leading self. I just want to write this on a note, and actually these 3 topics are going to be that. As an Asian American leader, to lead well in a multi-ethnic world, you're going to have to figure out how to lead self. What makes you tick? All right. The second bucket in leadership development that we probably want to work on is leading others. You see, when you're working in a multi-ethnic world, you're no longer leading Asian Americans alone. First generation, second, you are leading all sorts of people. Hispanic, you're interacting with African American. You are now a broader type of leader. So your leadership skills need to broaden out because not everybody thinks like you or talk like you. And I think the third thing is this: as we lead, not only do we need to do well in leading ourselves, leading others, we also need to learn how to lead the other culture is called organizational culture. Leading organization. And so anytime you're going to be leading a ministry or a team or any sorts of things like that, you want to think of these three buckets. And so we'll kind of just start there. Maybe that's a good conversation starter. And so, DJ, I think this is where you and I, we just want to toss it up is the first topic is this is we need to know how to articulate our own culture before we even start going out to another culture. When I say articulate our own culture, I gave some questions here. Can you even understand what makes you tick? I remember when we met with the executive pastor 4 years ago, he was just trying to understand how Asian Americans think and tick. And do you remember that conversation? And because I remember,
but I'd love to hear more about it.
with Dave Sean when he was there. He was
just in terms of our little round table.
Yeah, he was at the round table. He was trying to ask us like. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, it was funny because when a bunch of Asian Americans were sitting around the table and they asked a question, no one was able to answer anything. Seriously, it was like me just staring at you. So what does it mean to be, so here it is. What does it mean to be Asian American? Anybody just shout it out. Anything?
You're Asian and American at the same time. You have an individualist and collectivist culture intertwining, and sometimes they're separate and sometimes they're together.
Yeah, it's both and, right? Not either or. Good. Anything else? Love that answer. Anybody else? I mean, this is literally someone's asking, what does it mean to be Asian American? Or how do we help engage Asian American culture? And this is where we haven't even had a chance to articulate.
How many of you heard of Willow Creek Leadership Summit? Okay, so this August they had a Willow Creek Leadership Summit, which is a large church in the Chicago area, and they've been holding this leadership conference for about 20 years. And they've opened it up beyond church leadership to Christian leadership. And one of the speakers is an expert in cross-cultural competency. And she was describing how different cultures have 10 to 20 different variables of how they do things. And one of the things is the pace of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it was apt to mention it here that in an Anglo culture, they might wait 2 seconds before the next person talks, before it gets uncomfortable, and then they feel like that jump in. For Chinese people, 8 seconds of silence is still okay. And so just to have that different pace of reaction, you might think people don't have anything to say, but they're allowing some time allowing the dust settle before they jump in. And so slow down a little bit.
There you go.
And even in a room like this, we have a wide range of different cultures, and actually there's a concept on the internet called wisdom of the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And so we bring a little bit of understanding, but the more we can facilitate conversation together, we can all learn so much more.
When we were at a staff meeting, one of the first things I had to learn when I came over, and it was about 4 years ago, I went from an Asian American church plant into a more multi-ethnic, larger organization at Saddleback Church. And that's one of the bullet points here. It's called assertiveness versus compliance. Let me define and help put some terminology behind that. In a staff meeting, in a more multi-ethnic Western culture, ideas are valued. To throw and pitch ideas as much as you can. In fact, the more you throw on the board, it's awesome. I brought on someone, actually she's teaching a workshop right now, and she came from a Chinese church, and she came over, she goes, man, your staff meetings are so different. I said, why is that? And she said, in my staff meeting, in my Chinese church, ideas are not valued. They are, it's more of compliance, because when the pastor says, do this, we just kind of sit still and sit quiet. When I have all these things, I'm afraid that if I rock the boat, it's frowned upon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So assertiveness is, sometimes in an Asian culture, we would say that's, wow, why are you trying to usurp authority? But when you're dealing with Western culture or even a multi-ethnic world in this side of town, it's valued. Now, I'm not saying right or wrong, because please do not walk away saying, well, they prefer this or that. No, just when in Rome, do what Romans do. Know your context. And so that was something that I had to work across, because you're right, I had these 8-second delays, and everybody else at the table threw out all these ideas. I'm like, well, that was my idea. That was my idea. And all I was trying to do was just kind of submit to authority in a sense. Does that sound right? I don't know. So that's something that I love how you brought that up. And so 8 seconds. So I'm going to wait for 8 seconds before I go.
Yes.
That's right.
So we ask a question. Just let us.
We're not sure what you're asking though.
Yeah. What we're asking is, at the time was, what I was asking is, when can you articulate your own culture? Can you articulate how you're feeling? Because in this room, especially in our Asian culture, by saying nothing actually says something. But in a multi-ethnic world, in a Western culture, if you don't say anything, it means nothing. So what we call is high context, low context. And what I'm trying to say is when I was there, I assumed that maybe they understood what I was thinking. But if I wasn't direct or having a conversation to actually articulate what I'm feeling, then they wouldn't get what I'm saying. So let me give you another example here. Part of coming into a multi-ethnic world is you have to help shape and help other people understand you with that, and trying to articulate best. So here's an example here. One of the things about the organization, and this is one of the examples here is articulating, is when you come from when you are coming from a patristic family leadership style. So most Asian churches that I've been a part of is called patristic family leadership. Okay, that is familial, is very family. I can go up to uncle, go up to auntie, just talk through things, and in a organized, structured leadership. And this is Western. I mean, I could talk about from crew to IV to any organizational structure where it's a little bit larger, a little more complex. Not because it's the best thing in the world. It's just complex. Biola University. If you ever want to work in an institution, it is more organized, structured leadership where there are more lines to conversations to talk through. Well, I had a hard time doing this because when I first got to this church, I would literally just start knocking on Pastor Rick's door. I don't know, I'm the pastor's kid. I always had access to the pastor. So I would just start knocking on doors. The executive pastor, I started knocking on doors. I started sharing thoughts and ideas. And they would always say, hey, Kev, time out. Have you talked to your supervisor upline? I'm like, no, I want to talk to you. And so after a while, I was setting off alarms. And I was wondering, why am I setting off so many alarms? I don't get what's going on. And then finally my supervisor came back and said, Kev, I don't know where you're, obviously we had this culture conversation, I guess. He was like, hey, you probably want to come back and loop to me because, anytime you kind of go over my head or a few things get set off and people start worrying. And then they'd come back and loop to me and that's going to come back to me. And so this conversation wasn't, it was not going through, I don't want to really say the words chains of command, but it was a conversation where I was talking to so many different people and now everybody's all alarmed and set and worried. Because if I had a problem, let's just say I wanted to fix our building and I was talking to the wrong person, then they're trying to solve something, and now all the resources are trying to solve my problem. Does that make sense? So if I told, give me a perfect example. If I told mom, hey, I'm having a problem, and then I told dad I'm having a problem, now dad and mom, not knowing it, they're trying to solve my problem. And now what's happening to the organization when two people are trying to solve one problem? You're just having overload of resources, right? Does that make sense? You guys follow me so far? So I had to wrestle and navigate through that. But they thought I was trying to cause problems in a sense. Like, what are you doing, Kevin? Why are you trying to set off so many alarms? And I said, and I actually said this because I had to articulate my own culture. I said, wait, I'm sorry. No, this is the way I've grown up. This is the way I've been part of my church. My own culture influence is that I usually go to the source. I usually talk to the direct source. I try to loop everybody in. I usually want to loop my dad in. I want to loop my mom in. That's just how I operate. But of course, it's different from a family leadership style to an organized leadership style. Does that make sense? Just some learning lessons. And I had to figure that out, and I had to articulate that because I didn't know why I wasn't trying to disrupt anything. Because one side thought I was trying to disrupt something, and the other side thought I was just, for me, I just thought I was just trying to make everything known. So that's a particular topic there. Anybody want to loop into that or talk about that? This is about knowing each other's self and knowing how to lead, to be aware of that.
I have a question for you, especially Kevin, and DJ too. But I know you have interactions with a lot of Asian American young leaders. Can you identify which ones you think will be able to adjust to that kind of culture?
Good.
And some that I think you're just better in the long run to be in the
Perfect.
Yeah.
This is Steve. Steve,
Yeah, Steve.
thank you. Good question there. That actually brings us to topic 2. You want to be able to leverage different leadership styles in decision making. I often get this question, and DJ gets it quite a bit as well. Hey, am I made for the organized structured church? Notice I didn't say mega church because it's not mega. Am I organized? Am I best suited for an organized structured church? And it's going to come down to decision making and how comfortable you are. So let me just give you some thoughts here. I am used to a family consensus leadership style. Give you an example of consensus leadership. Everybody in this room, we need to make a decision. Are we going to put a building up or not put a building up? And typically, in the culture of the church I grew up in, it took 100% votes to make that happen. Does that make sense? Well, Aunt Susie doesn't think we should put a gym in the room. And you're like, well, okay, but Aunt Susie's got a point, and so we just got a timeout for Aunt Susie. Does that make sense? Okay. On the other side, another decision-making process in a more organized, in a structured leadership style is called more of a missional-focused church. Let me help you out here. Missional focus means the mission is the most important thing. Even if Aunt Susie doesn't agree, we got to go forward. Now, let me tell you how this decision works. If the vision of the senior pastor is to say, we are going to India to plant a church, and the elders have said, we agree wholeheartedly, 100%, we trust you. And then you're going to get 20% of chatter. There's always chatter in a church. 20% will say, if you do these resources, we're going to leave. Or we're going to cause whatever. In a family-structured church, consensus leadership, the decision would be like, all right, let's pause until we get 20% uploaded. Does that make sense? In a mission-oriented church, the mission always drives the church. And so decision-making says, we'll lose 20%, but we're going to pick up 30%. Now, I remember I shared that with one of our, a person who was thinking of jumping over to this type of culture, type of church. I said, well, does that sting you? And he goes, yeah, I don't know if I can do that. I said, well, this is exactly what it is. One is more mission-focused and the other one is more family-focused. The value of family is more. So let me give you an example in the Bible. Do you remember the 12 spies? Remember the 12 spies? All right, good. Moses said, hey, man, we got a mission here. God says we're going to Canaan. We are going to Canaan. 400 years of slavery, that's bad. Sent out 12 spies. 12 came back. This is what we call consensus thinking. Nothing wrong. We know God's purpose is good, so it's not bad. Moses chose to do what type of leadership style? Mission-focused or family-focused? He went family-focused. He took the value of 10 spies over the 2 gung-ho guys. Now, no one left, thank God. 12 spies all stayed, and Joshua and Caleb stayed together. But that was an example of what we call consensus leadership style, when the leader should have just said, dude, we're going. Now, therein lies, Steve, the answer to your question. It depends. We need both. I think DJ said it. Maybe DJ you want to add to that. But typically, these are probably the big hinge points of decision making. Do you want to be in a church like that, or do you want to be in a church like this? And it's not, again, not a right or wrong. It's just, are you mission focused or do you want to be family focused? And a lot of people like that. You want to add to that, and then maybe Steve can counter back.
Let me flip it on a different dimension. So is family and mission, which is a very nice continuum.
Yeah.
Is one Asian or is one American?
Well, I did.
Is there one first or second generation? You didn't say so.
Yeah.
But that's part of your discernment. What kind of culture do you have personally?
Mhm.
And how much elasticity do you have to cross into other cultures? Some people are not able to cross into other cultures. Actually, most people are not able to cross into other cultures. Most of us grow up in a particular cultural context, and that shapes our worldview, and that shapes our understanding of what's right and wrong, and what's proper and what's biblical and what's not. And yet, those that have had broader exposure particularly I would say, those that are second generation Asian Americans or those that come to the U.S. when they're under 12, they have the potential to have more elasticity across the cultural continuum, the individual and the collectivistic, like our sister said back there. And so when you have that more elasticity, God can use that, just as God called Paul and Barnabas into a new culture while John Mark and Barnabas stayed behind. Paul went out while Peter stayed behind. So it's how God shapes you through His sovereignty and through why are you born in the 21st century? God has something for you. Why are you born in a bicultural context and sometimes you feel like you're second generation? Well, God has something that He can do with that. Nothing's wasted in God's economy. And so part of that is discerning your story and discerning your life experience and how God leads. Of course, God can always lead with exceptional, a call out of nowhere, but most of the time, God uses the life experience you have, your skills, your talents, your passion, your life experiences to guide and direct where you would go in His kingdom.
So I want to come back. Remember what we're trying to do is how do we, our intent, our goal is to help fill up your spiritual gift bag of leading well in a multi-ethnic world. It doesn't matter where you are. And so here's a life journey, and this is directly to you all. No, we're not advocating jump ship, do this. What we are advocating is leading out of your strengths and out of your best suitedness. I made a decision. I grew up in a first-generation Vietnamese church. My father was a pastor. And I definitely know what a first-generation church is. We planted one, we planted several. And God wired in my heart, as you already see, is a catalyst, a fire starter, more mission-driven. But it does not mean that I don't love my fellow countrymen. And so the best for me is I lean towards one way, but it does not mean that I don't want to help this way. And so I often I'll speak at Asian retreats all the time. Asian American retreats, first generation. I just spoke at a retreat in Kansas for a Vietnamese summer camp for youth kids. But that doesn't, so you can still put influence wherever you go because you need to.
Now let me kind of unpack your personal life history.
Yeah.
That that explains a bit more of how God shaped you.
Yeah.
So you grew up in a traditional Vietnamese family and a traditional Vietnamese church.
Yeah.
So you know how to operate in that context appropriately,
Right.
respectfully, and how things work there so people aren't offended. And yet you also picked up this Western cultural practice. Where did that come from?
Good. I think what it is you can't avoid it because I went to an American school, a top state institution in Texas. I went to a seminary that's mostly Western in thinking. I worked for a corporate, what's it called? A top 500 company?
Fortune
500 company, Singular Wireless, AT&T. A lot of my management, a lot of my leadership ability came through corporate America. And so the influence that God has put, obviously He's put this in front of me. He's put that in many of us. And so through that, I think God was, just like Paul, there's a training that allows you to do both. It just seems that I gravitated towards that more.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we don't want to stay sharp on the other side as well. Right? So I think whatever it is, it's just, when I say leveraging the different leadership styles, do both. Do it well. Do it well. Try to do both as best you can. Because again, we'll do anything for the gospel. That is, as long as you see the conviction here. The conviction is, I think, DJ, we'll talk to anybody, we'll help anybody, and we want them to succeed well in wherever they're at.
Yeah, because the idea of leadership is to bring people along, not leave them behind.
Right.
So you want to bring as many as you can, and those that cannot go a certain way, you want to put them in good care. And so I think we're responsible for all that God puts in front of us, and we do the best we can, and we collaborate and we work with others, whether that's generationally or culturally or cross-culturally. And one of the newer developments in American church, broadly speaking, is neighborhood saturation churches. So it's becoming a better strategy for churches in a locality to work together and not apart, so that people can have repeated exposure to the gospel message, every children, every family, and have a better chance at experiencing the wholeness and the goodness of the gospel.
So I want to give you a story. This is actually a true story. My best friend, he's at he left his church. There was an exodus of an ethnic church. He ended up going to another type of church across the street, more multi-ethnic. And he was struggling with this. He goes, Kev, I go to a multi-ethnic church, but everything about me is Asian American. And to the point, he was asking me, even my small groups, all Asian Americans. In fact, it was a small group from the exodus of the other church in a small group together, right? I was like, well, okay, that's okay. And then the question he was asking, but I know that inherently that doesn't sound right? We just kind of switch building, switch pastor, but we're still the same group of people. And he was asking the question, man, how do I not break free of it, but how do I begin the conversation of including other people, my neighbors? Does that make sense? We were a small group, but then we were never engaging our neighbors. The soccer team my kids go to, I want to engage them and bring them in. And so, this is more than just even church, but even in a small group environment. He was basically asking this question, I think it's because God put it in his heart. I know that I'm Asian American, but I know that I have neighbors and classmates and schoolmates and teachers and parents that I engage every day. How do I bring them into my world and introduce them to good news? Because I can just introduce the good news and just throw them off to another church or whatever it is. And I think that really struck a chord in me, because I think all of us in this room, because we live in America, you will likely run into more non-Asian Americans than Asian Americans that live next to you. Unless you're really in a saturated Asian American area, that's a different story. But pretty much, I live in Orange County. 50% of the population is Anglo. The other 50% is other. And so 1 in 2 chance I'm going to run into an other. And so I think that's something that I did. So anyways, I want to keep going on. Steve, you want to keep adding to that, or anybody else? Okay, here, this is
Patrick.
Patrick, and I saw a hand over there. Okay, so Patrick, go for it.
So I'm just wondering, in your experiences as you're leading in multi-ethnic or maybe predominantly white communities, in that sense, how do you help influence the different cultural values that you bring in to make that even aware? Because let's say the leadership structure as you go up, it's very common that a lot of higher up organizations are predominantly Caucasian and white. And so how do you come into that context as a minority and highlight a value that's not normally seen in that context? Maybe their value is efficiency and results, but you're coming in with the values of nurturing and trying to create collaboration. And how have you learned to cultivate that sense of awareness? Because it seems like there may be Asian Americans who are saying, I would love to be in those spaces, but a lot of the things that I'm bringing aren't even highlighted as something valued. And so I need to either change who I am, then make myself more valuable to them.
I want to start off with a thing. You did a research with the Pew Research Group, and talk about Asian Americans and white assimilation versus other demographics. You'd be surprised that there are a lot more Asians assimilate. Basically, the article said Asians assimilate better in white culture. But do you remember stuff like that, or? I know it's off the top of my head.
I can't think of it specifically, but generally speaking, Anglo-Caucasian culture has seen Asian Americans as fitting into and assimilating into their culture much more easily than Latino and African Americans. Partly because of our hard work ethic, and partly because of our culture that values submission. And so it's just easier to lead Asian Americans. And so the default is for Asian Americans just to blend in and not so much bring the Asian American cultural values to bear, because we fit in them. But I think what would be helpful for Patrick on the question is you're Vietnamese American, Asian American working in a multi-site large church organization that's mostly Caucasian at the top, but your campus is 50% Asian American. So you've got quite a unique dynamic that some people want to kind of take a peek into to say, hey, what's that like? Or how much of your Asianness can show up, and how much of your Caucasian savvy fits up, and so on.
I think
just a few minutes, because I want to.
That's good. Actually, that's topic 3. Is speak up. Your voice is important. I think when you're leading an organization, any ministry you're in, let's just start there. I know that I don't want this to be the question of, hey, how do you make it work at Saddleback Church? I guess just hear me out. Becoming an insider is way more important than being the token Asian guy or girl. Okay? Becoming an insider is way more important than being the token Asian guy or girl. What do I mean by that? When you want to make it about, well, that's not what an Asian does, you are an outsider. But when you begin to build trust, like in any organization or team, when you begin to build trust, people don't see color, and that's the truth. When you are on a leadership team that completely trusts each other, that means this guy can produce, she can do some good stuff. Hey, wow! When they speak, there is a level of authority or level of influence. People don't even ask that color question. People don't even think that anymore. I remember when I first got on. I remember the first thing I wanted to do was make my staff multi-ethnic right away. Boom, diversity, right? And I remember I was like asking DJ, "Hey man, just send me a bunch of Asian Americans." And I started submitting names, and everybody's like, "Well, it's kind of odd, having a complete pastoral staff that's Asian American in a multi-ethnic church." And I said, "Okay, but then I at first I was like, well, that sounds so affirmative action. Why would you do that?" And I remember I was struggling with that early on, Patrick. But then over time, after you win some battles, some victories, I actually don't even get that question anymore. I don't. Our staff is about 50% Asian American now. 3 of them, and it was actually is leading a workshop here at this conference. 3. Which is kind of cool, because I didn't intend it that way. But they seem to be good at what they're doing, and I love that. But then again, we have Hispanic. Actually, our staff is very diverse. We have several Hispanics, we have Anglo, we have Asians, we got them all. But I think the thing is, becoming an insider is more important than saying, hey, you know what? If you were Asian, you would do this. I would never lead a conversation like that. Hey, if it is now, time out here. I will definitely say that because we know the demographic more. We will do things that will encourage some of the family values. So, Asians, we're very good at fellowshipping, right? And so, earlier workshop, Angela Yee was leading a workshop on event planning. Well, that's great. So we will produce things that help build families. So I won't say, hey, Asians value family, so therefore let's do more family-based events, right? So I wouldn't start off that way.
Mm-hmm.
I would say God loves families, so let's do family events. Does that make sense, guys? I would say God loves family. The Bible says clearly about family, and so I would highlight what biblical values that God sees as important. Because remember, not everything about Asian is good either. You have to admit that, right? Okay, good. Because not everything about shame and guilt is good. The Bible says we are free from shame and guilt. So therefore, I don't talk about shame and guilt issues. But I would lead that way. And I would think in my mind, okay, people would get that. And indirectly, Asian Americans will say, oh, that's a family-based event. Let's do some family-based stuff. I don't know what to add to that.
No, that's good. I'll add a little bit more to that. So I've had the opportunity to connect with both largely Caucasian churches as well as Asian American churches, and just came back from Dallas from a multi-ethnic church. And I think as the world and as our American culture is becoming more diverse and more multi-ethnic, I think the healthy churches are learning to embrace that global perspective, kingdom of God perspective, I would say, in how we approach ministry rather than being affirmative action or being so racial in our presentation of values and leadership. And so actually Dr. John Perkins, one of the leading voices in African American culture and a leader in community development, he said, let's make it about the human race, one race, and we got to get past this racial specific things and embrace the biblical culture that we can all share in. So it's to talk about God's family, not because we have a particular way of how we do family in our Korean or Chinese cultures. The second thing I would say is that healthier and fruitful churches are beginning to define their church mission as a culture in and of itself that brings everybody together. And so it's not about Asian or American or Caucasian or special interest groups. It's about, hey, here's what Saddleback or whatever your church name is, and here's our culture, and here's our call in how we minister to people and bring people together that way. And I think that's a much healthier approach.
Yeah, good question there, Patrick. Back there had a question. Name, so we just hear it? What's your name again?
Kenny.
Hey, Kenny.
Yeah. So I think because Asian American has such a more broad spectrum in terms of generational, linguistic,
Yeah.
value system, and once it comes to leadership, let's say making decisions based on such values, and because different generations and ethnic groups have different value systems, how would that show up in an organizational culture? And I think bigger question would be, do you believe in an organization that comes from top down, meaning let's say a new church plan with such Asian values, or per se, or versus more okay, this is the group that you have, and this is how we're gonna be making decisions? Sorry, this is kind of really a
Oh no, good. Hey, great question. I think let me just repeat it so that everybody can understand. Kenny asked the question. Is I want to frame it as best. So correct me if I'm wrong. Hey, should the pastoral team and the leadership team, the planting team, the core team, should they drive the values of what they of what they believe in, or should the fish who show up drive the values of the ethos of the church? Is that right?
Well, that's part of it. So let's see. Because there's so many diversity within the groups, would he be thinking that we need to minister to different groups in different ways and have different organizations that cater to different groups? Sorry,
I'm going to take a stab at it. Let's take a stab at it. All right. Yeah, the leader or the senior leadership team, and let's just start with a ministry. Whatever ministry you're in, you could be in so many different. I don't want this to be just about one church particularly. The leader will drive where the values need to be, and that's the type of fish you get. So when you go fishing, you don't ask the fish, "What do you want to fish? What do you want to eat?" I want to just catch anything, right? When you go fishing, you pick a certain bait and you put it in a certain part of the river or the lake to catch the fish that you want. And I think value starts from the top because that's what you want to look for. I mean, that's what we call targeting, right? And I think it's important. So if the senior leader, the pastor, the ministry leader, the team leader, the director of whatever it is, I think they set the tone. They set the pace and the direction. So if they want a next generation worship service environment because we want to bring next generation, then they should set that tone. And if they don't, when you don't set that tone, you're actually setting a tone. It means you just want anything to come. And I think that's actually something you want to be more targeted on. Of course, everybody wants a room filled with people, but I think you want to make sure that you're fishing for the fish that you actually want. And so therefore, whatever value, if you believe in next generation millennial thinking, that's why churches build millennial type of style of worship, style of preaching, style of ministry, then you set those values. Again, we're trying to stay away from that culture. We're not trying to say we're looking for a cultural thing. We're just like, look, if we value family, then we're going to build a ministry based on family. If we value a shame-free church, then we won't talk about guilt, right? We're not going to guilt people to serving. We're going to say we serve because you get to be a blessing to other people. So we will use language that's not loaded with all the stuff that we don't want, right? And so notice I use two things without saying Asian American culture. I just use the word shame, which is biblical. Grace and shame is biblical, and I use the word family. I don't use language like Asian American language. Even though we like to say it, we claim it, it's not ours. Trust me, it's not. Biblically, there's Bible teaches about grace all the time. So let's stay away from it. So anyways, I would start my values biblically, and then I would lean off of that. You want to add to that?
Yeah, one thing I'd add is I'm idealistic. So I do meet pastors who are also idealistic, and they say, hey, our church is all about the gospel, it's for everybody. But I think realistically that's a little naive because God's gifted each church a certain way and each leader a certain way and given a responsibility to focus and not just be open-handed and whatever happened is God's will. And so I think it's a part of responsibility to know how to organize and target and focus your strategic plan in your ministry philosophy and planning that leverages your strength because God gave you those gifts to be good stewards of. And then there are times when you need to step back and evaluate where you need to make some course adjustments. Mm-hmm. So while you might be targeting young adults and God brings you the seniors into your church for some reason because your teaching is so winsome and you've got a soft heart that all these older people start coming to church, well, you might need to make some adjustments in your ministry programming to also serve the people that God has already brought you. And so it's part of that leadership dynamic in a fast-changing world where you can't just decide on one thing and run with it for 10 years. I think the world is changing so fast. The smartphone you buy today will not be available in a store in 2 years. And so that's never been like that in human history. And so I think our ministry also needs to be very agile and adaptable in a fast-changing world.
There's two questions back there. I see one for Faye and another one here. But here, without saying Asian American, right? Thinking, because I know that if I say anybody have questions at the end of it, well, let's try to be cross-cultural here. I left you a note card. DJ and I gave you a note card. What I want you to do is this, and this is actually an open topic if you want. We may not be able to cover it, but on your note card, can you just write down a question or a topic? And if you want us to reach out to you, I'm gonna leave leave your email address. And what we'll do is we'll collect it out. And I told you, 45 minutes, an hour, can't cover much. But I want you to know that DJ and I and many other people, we'd love to chat with you and talk with you and further carry the conversation on. But just write that on a note card. The note card, just write question or a topic and just put your email address. That's it. And when you leave this room, drop it here. We'll bring it up. We'll talk. I promise you, we'll reach out. We'll converse anytime you want. You want to do it over Facebook? We'll do it over Facebook. All right? So, without saying Asian American, hopefully that makes sense, right? Because the other workshops, anybody got any questions? And everybody's like, and they forget to count to 8. So now you got like 8 minutes to figure it out. Okay, Faye back there with the lovely hand. What's up?
When you said a question with your site, were you the one that hired your staff, or was it the mothership?
Okay.
The mothership, ministry contextualizes to leaders. So
Yes.
were you the one that knew these people, and you were the one that hired them?
Right. Absolutely. The answer is yes, and yes. I think in any organization, the more webs you have, it's more complex than just like, hey, did you do this? We believe in what we call checks and balances. So as an organization grows, obviously the leader makes the final call of the team that they're putting in together. But there's always a checks and balances. For example, I'm going to bring on a worship pastor or anybody, and this is a specific question, it seems like. Whenever you want to bring on a worship pastor, the worst thing to do, this is why I believe in elder-led, is that, hey, I made this hire, and I claim this guy. Well, what happens if he sucks? Who are they going to blame now? All right, so yeah, you see, that's why we believe in elder-led, right? So here's the thought. I do have extra resources in an organization to say, you know what, I want you to talk to that worship pastor. I want you to interview with this person. I want you to interview with this person. Now, this is a very standard interview process. It's called a 360 interview process that Stanford actually came up with. One candidate gets like a bunch of people interviewing them. And so I'm no longer the interviewer, even though I'm making a decision. I'm actually leaning on 10 people that's talked to this particular worship pastor. One is on content, one is on chemistry, one is on this and this. And I'm building, so now I can use consensus leadership. And so more onion layers being peeled back, and at the end of the day, of course, I'll say, you know what, I feel good about this. 7 of the 10 people said we're good. I am making my final recommendation to our elder board. And the elder said, hey, cool, sign off. But by that time, I've already done a 360, and okay, this is thorough. So I think for us, Faye, good question is, anybody who wants to do any hiring practice on volunteer or non-volunteer, a 360 interview process helps deflect bullets from me. But most importantly is I trust the wisdom and the counsel of many. Notice that is an Asian American thought process, isn't it? But I didn't say Asian American. That's very counsel driven, and that's okay. And actually, because that was so cool, now you ask back to Patrick's question. People love that 360 interview process so much that they started using it in all the other campuses. And now who's influencing who? The Asian American culture, right? So, but again, it's not Asian American. It's just something that we think it's just good wisdom to do the counsel of many. I think Proverbs does that. Good question, Faye. Anybody? Oh,
We've got a few minutes to wrap up, so
yeah.
I'm going to wrap up and then we'll take one last question. So one of the things that this workshop kind of leads into is a new book that I just written.
Yes.
Titled Multiagent.church. It's digital first, so it's available online right now at multiagent.church. And you pick up one of these cards, you get 30% off. And then the print edition will be available maybe by Christmas or so. So if you're eager to learn more about what we've talked about, I've written a book based on the latest demographics and the potential and opportunities that we have as bicultural Asian Americans to really make a huge impact in not just America, but in the world today because of such a fast-changing culture. And we we have a unique contribution to make, and 100% of the proceeds will go to 30 Network, which Kevin will talk about what 30 Network is.
So how do we keep creating space so that we can advance Asian American leaders in a multi-ethnic world? And I think that's where the 30 Network was birthed. The 30 Network actually was out of King David had 30 men to help him lead. It was his best of his best, right? I believe deep down in my heart that God has gifted Asian American leaders, not because you're the best at anything, just you have a unique position, gifted to do so much more than any other generation before us. I guess I'm just going to finish this thought and then close, and I want to be able to share an encouraging thought for you. My father last year, for the very first time, because we never served together, he's a pastor of an ethnic Vietnamese church, of churches, I guess. And he goes, son, I'm really proud of you. Now, this is my dads don't do this. Dads don't say that. And he came to me, I'm really proud of you. And obviously I was like, okay, I'm like, okay, something's happening here. Hold on. No, Dad, I'm not buying you the new car. You've been able to influence many different people better than I have in my ministry the years that I've been here. And of course I paused him, the good son said, no, Dad, it's because I can speak English. You can. And that's the truth. He did broken English. But I think what it is what he was trying to say is, and of course I honored it. It was like, hey, you have been set up for this time, for this season. You have gone to the best school that I could have given you. I have provided you the best opportunity as a father, as parents, to minister to you, to give you the good news. The good news came to the first generation church. Honor them. Never say this sucks, because the good news, the gospel, came through me, through a Vietnamese church with a Vietnamese Sunday school teacher who spoke no English. I thank God for that church. So always honor them. But the cool thing is this. All of us in here have been gifted to reach a broader influence. So don't just think one or the other. It's not either or, it's both and. That's the cool thing. We can reach much, much more the gospel. And I love how Acts we just talked about, that all Jews and Greeks heard of the good news. I want that to be your encouragement. And so the 30 Network is our way of giving back. We know that all of us have shared a lot, and so it's our way of saying, hey, how do we bring the best minds of Asian American leaders in this world that we live in? How can we bring them to the table to share ideas, to help each other out, to be a network of resources, to be able to talk through things, not a mentoring or coaching, just talk through things and advance them in a world where it is becoming increasingly multi-ethnic, increasingly more non-Christian. But there is hope and there is light through all of us in this room when we work together. So that is a beautiful, beautiful concept. So you want to add to that?
That's I want to make sure everyone got to hear what we'd like to continue with, and really appreciate you being here. So close in prayer, and then
good.
We're
gonna have questions. Can I give you just a 2-minute story for you? Just a 2-minute story, and then I'm gonna pray you guys out. Well, this is my prayer. This is my prayer as a story. My son, 6 years old, just finished baseball season. Okay, I don't know if you guys have done baseball season. Maybe not, because Asians don't do baseball. Well, in his league, he can only do, it's called a 5-run limit. They don't want to blow kids out, right? And so they can only do 5 runs per inning. Okay, 5 runs in. And so he's learning how to score runs at the T-ball. But a friend of mine was a pastor as well, and he was telling about how he was coaching his son, and they had a 10-run limit in their league. And so it's their final game. If they win, they get the pizza party. If they lose, they go home. And so I know, it's just how it is. And so it was the last inning. His son's the pitcher, and the score is they were up by 11 runs. 11 runs, okay? Well, that means they won already, right? But you got to play through the game. Does that make sense? Okay. They're up 11, and now he tells his son, hey, son, you're the pitcher. Go get him, man. 3 more outs. We're going home. This is good. We won the game. The son says, yeah, Dad. And so he gets up on the mound, and he kind of winds up, and he throws the pitch, and the guy hits the ball into the outfield. Okay? Get runners on first base. And the son's kind of upset right now. He's like, come on, man, I can win this game. And dad actually knew that hey, his son is going. Oh, it's time out. He goes up to his son and he goes, "Hey son, hey, we already won the game, man. I mean, look at the scoreboard. It's 11. We're up by 11. They can't score more than 10. Just throw as fast as you can. I don't care. Hit him. Hit Patrick in the head. Doesn't matter. You can block them. They can hit 20 home runs. It don't matter. Just throw a pitch. All right, yeah, Dad. He goes up there and he throws a pitch and he's just all over the place. It's just up, down, doesn't matter. But basically, he walks the second batter. There's now a runner on first, a runner on second. You guys follow me? Okay. He's kicking the dirt. He's just frustrated. You just tell this is a 10-year-old kid just kind of like getting all angst up here. You're like, what's going on? And then time out. Hey, son, I love you no matter what. You see that your teammates, they're cheering. You know why? Because we're going to a pizza party after this. They know we've already won. They're excited. They're jumping up and down. You see all the people, they're yelling. They just want to finish this inning. Throw as fast as you can. Throw as hard as you can. We're going to eat a pizza no matter what you do. We've won the game. Then he winds up and he throws it, strikes him out. The game is done. They win. Everybody's cheering, pizza party, we're going off. Isn't that how the church world is? You see, God, you've already won the game, guys. We have already won the game. You can't screw up what God is going to do to this people in this world. Get out there, throw some pitches. Because we got a pizza party. I want that to be an encouragement to you because I know some of you may be struggling, maybe having a hard time in your ministry, but you can't do anything wrong. God's got his hand on you. Is that good? I pray for you guys. Father God, we love you. We thank you, Lord, that you've gifted us so well. But more importantly, Lord, you've given us a mission to chase down everybody for the gospel. Lord, wherever we are in our ministry, Lord, let us be more productive, more effective, more passionate. Let us come home with the victory, Lord, because the victory is yours. In your name we pray.
Amen.
All right, guys, we're ready to go.
Pass your...
Yeah, give me the index card.